Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on a Sunday morning to listen all about bats. And so today we have with us Rohit Chakravarty, who we is often referred to as the real life Batman. So he's today going to take us into the bat caves to learn more about bats. Before we get started with that, uh, uh, just for the people who are new to these sessions and to Early Bird, I'll just quickly introduce Early Bird to everyone. Early Bird is a project under Nature Conservation Foundation, which works towards getting kids like all of you closer to nature, and we use birds as our medium to do that. Though today's talk's not about birds, though we want to get people closer to nature in different forms, while birds is one of the mediums that we use. And how do we do this is through creating content, training teachers to be bird teachers, and also interacting with kids like you through workshops or webinars like these. And for today's session, we have Rohit, who is going to talk about birds and about bats, which are often confused to be birds flying at night. And so, just a few things before we get into the session. Some rules, just that we have kept you all on mute just to keep and manage the session better. At any point you want to ask a question or you have any doubts, either you can use the chat box or you can also use the raise hand reaction. While we'll not take a lot of questions in between when Rohit's talking, there is a dedicated Q&A session towards the end, which you all can ask your questions, unmute yourself, and ask then. But throughout the session, when he's talking about some things and you have difficulties understanding, or at that point you have any question pop into your mind, you can type those questions in the chat box. And if it is something about clarificatory kind of questions, we'll take it then and there so that it's easier for you to understand the different things that we are talking today. But we do have a Q&A session towards the end. And we want to make this session as interactive as possible. So make sure that you ask a lot of questions. I'm sure you would have a lot of questions as well to ask. And with that, I'll quickly introduce Rohit as well. Like I was saying, often he is referred to as a Batman in real life because he's a bat researcher. He studies bats. Um he basically loves bats a lot from what I have seen. And so currently he's working with Nature Conservation Foundation and Bat Conservation International, leading research and conservation projects on bats in India. But for over a last decade or so, he has studied bats in different parts of India, especially the Andaman Island and the Uttarakhand. So, like two extremes almost of India. He has been studying bats. So if you have any questions about bats in general, this is the person you should go to ask. So yeah, welcome Rohit, and thank you for making time today to share your love about bats with everyone. Um, just one thing, since this session is for majorly for kids, we'll prioritize questions that come from children, and then if there's time, we can address the questions that come from adults. Yeah. Over to you, Rohit. Thank you
Okay.
once again.
No, thank you so much, Amrita. That's a very kind introduction. And now that Amrita has put me on the spot as a real life Batman, you all have caught me at the wrong time because I should have been active at night. So, but I'll try my best to not be grumpy and, and be as as genial as possible. So with that, I'll share my screen, and thanks to all of you who made time on a Sunday morning to attend a talk about bats. It's not birds. It's something you don't. I mean, most people take a lot of interest in birds and other things that are easily observable. To see an audience here, they making time on a Sunday morning for a talk on bats is great. Okay, I was just checking whether my screen is sharing is working and sound is also being shared. Okay, cool. So I'll get started, and it's a great time for us early Sunday morning to get into the bat cave. um, Now, whenever we talk about bats, of course, there are two different things that come to your mind. The first is Batman, which hopefully all of you have grown up reading or watching. It was a big thing in my generation, and hopefully that is continuing to some extent. But on the other hand, once you take that image of Batman away, a real life bat, if you ever encounter a real life bat, your first reaction is of fear. And that is something, that's how even I was programmed to behave, because it's an animal that is dark, it flies, you don't know how to react to it. And throughout your your upbringing, your parents, your grandparents have been telling you that this is an animal that brings you bad luck, this is an animal that causes a lot of harm to you. So you're programmed to not like that animal at the very first instance. And this talk, I'm not going to tell you whether to like or dislike bats, but I'll present some facts to you and leave it to your judgment. So, because it's a Sunday morning and because you've got the real life Batman in the morning, I don't want to start off by doing a lot of talking. I'll let you do a lot more talking than me in the first half of the presentation. And here are a few questions that I'll bring up one after the other. And I would appreciate if you could speak up or put the answers down in the chat. So the first question for you are bats birds or mammals? Who's going to answer that for me?
You can use the chat box or you can raise your hand and we can unmute you to answer as well.
Okay, we are getting quite a few answers, and we have a very bright audience, which is very confident that bats are mammals. So my next question to you is, why are they mammals? So what makes a bird a bird? What makes a mammal a mammal? Evolution. Okay, evolution is the process, but as per evolution, what is it that a bat does differently from a bird, or a mammal in general does differently from a bird? So some answers: bats give birth, they don't lay eggs. Okay, bats do not lay eggs. Feathers, Arvelin, do you mean to say that bats have feathers or do they not have feathers? Okay, bats eat fruits as well. Birds also eat fruits. But a lot of people have been saying that birds lay eggs and bats don't, which is a great answer. Um, Teeth, okay. Having a nipple, okay. That's a great answer too. So, okay, so we've actually got we've started off with a very on a great foot. Bats, all the answers that you've mentioned are actually correct, and bats are mammals for the reason that they have fur, they don't have feathers. So just like us, they have hair on their body and a very dense, bushy, silky hair. Actually, some of the bats that I've handled make better shampoo ad models than most of the actors and actresses that you see. They have super smooth and silky hair. They have teeth just like us. Again, they don't have a beak. And another thing about bats having teeth, by the way, is if you've noticed how different the teeth are of a cat versus a dog, when we talk about bats, we're actually talking about many different species. So depending on what each species eats, their teeth are shaped differently because some require sharper teeth to cut through certain prey. Others require relatively shallow or blunt teeth to consume other kinds of prey. I'm not mentioning the prey right now because that's going to come in later as another question. Bats do not lay eggs. They give birth to live young, which was the first answer from all of you. And one person, Disha, mentioned, and something you might also be thinking, like all humans and dogs, cats, humans ourselves, just like, sorry, like all mammals, humans included, bats feed milk to their young ones. So their young ones, for the first few months of their life, survive on the mother's milk and then they advance to eating other things. Okay, here's a guess question. I do not expect you to know the exact numbers. How many species of bats do you think exist in the world? And no Googling, no. Okay, Arvelin has raised her hand. You can speak up, Arvelin. Okay, getting some answers. 5,000, 7,000, 7 lakh, no, 70 lakh, 986.
Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands. Okay. And but why not 70 lakh 986? And Vyom, why not 70 lakh 985? 7,000. Okay. Wow, you guys are very precise. 30,352. 100. Okay. That was a lot of bargaining from 30,352 to down to 100. Wait, from 5 years. 89,907. Okay, you guys are being very precise here. Can we just talk in, say, windows of 500, like 1,000 to 1,500, 1,500 to 2,000, or something like that. It can even be in 10,000s. Okay, Riyansh says realistically there should be at least 100. Why is that so, Riyansh? Why can there not be 99? In India, 123. Okay. Okay. I think the answers have sort of stopped right now. Time to put up the answers on the screen. Mm. So globally, all over the world, there are 1,461 species of bats, uh, quite far lower than 89,907, but still a very large number, given that the entire number of species of mammals in the world is somewhere in the 5,000. So bats make up roughly 30% of the entire mammal diversity of this planet. In India, the story is no different. Out of about 500 species of mammals, 136 are just bats. So, and in fact, in India, bats are the largest group of mammals in India. So that's a remarkable diversity and also makes us wonder that, despite being the most diverse group of mammals, we still know so little about them, right? Okay, next question. How big are bats? This answer can vary. So you can try and tell me the two ends of the spectrum, if there is a spectrum. And you can use relative things. Okay, 30 inches. 30 inches is about, I guess, 70 to 90 centimeters. So that's about 3 feet long. Okay. Yeah, okay. 78 centimeters, big as a computer. Okay, not fixed. That's a great answer. Smallest is the Kitty's hognose bat. And how small is that, Kiran? And that's also the smallest mammal, by the way, the Kitty's hognose bat. It's 5 centimeters. Okay. So actually, this is an answer in which none of you can go wrong because everything is accepted in this answer. From a tiny bat, this is not the kitty's hognose, but it is not much larger than that either. This is a small bat from the Himalayas, which weighs about 3 grams, and 3 grams is, you know, smaller than your the travel toothpaste that you use. The smallest of the Colgate toothpaste dabbas. This is smaller than that. So something that can fit on your palm all the way up to an animal that is this big has a wingspan of about 4 to 5 feet. Bats cover all shapes and sizes. There are typically most of the species are in the range of 5 to 100 grams. 100 grams is like the bigger fruit and nut or bigger Boneville chocolate bar, all the way up to the size of a big fat rooster. Bats cover the entire spectrum. And if you've seen bats closely, what do they look like? Whether you keep an eye on the chat as well, there's some very good trivia being thrown, which honestly is not covered in this presentation. The giant golden crowned bat from the Philippines is the largest bat in the world with a massive wingspan of 5 feet. Okay, but coming to the question, what do bats look like? Like a mouse? Like messed up dogs? Some look like other animals. Okay, which other animals, Riansh? Mm-hmm. Rats with wings. Okay. Anything other than a rat that comes to your mind? Rat or a dog? Pig with wings. Actually, yeah, to be honest, there is a bat that looks a bit like a pig, has a pig-like snout, but I don't have it here on my presentation. Monsters with wings. Okay. I think monsters is a very big class. I guess monsters can look quite, have a lot of variety in their appearance. Furry panther kid. Okay. Okay, now I think all of you are. It'll be great to put all of your comments into ChatGPT and see what, or an illustration, an art generator, AI art generator, and see what you get. But I'm guessing it would not be very different from a bat. Most of you said a mouse with wings, and then there were other people who thought they looked like dogs. And these are actually the two most common references to a bat. So, for example, the fruit bats, fruit-eating bats are which have slightly larger eyes, look like dogs. And in fact, in many languages, the flying fox, so even in English, the large bat that you see hanging on trees all over the country, is called a flying fox because it literally looks like a dog with wings. Then there are other bats that look like bunny rabbits. They have large ears, slightly evil-looking rabbits, but they have large ears like a rabbit. There are bats that have rhinoceros-like horns coming out of their faces, and this is a part of the nose of the bat. Most bats, the most typical looking bat, most number of species look like mouse with wings, and it is no surprise actually that's what so the whole world was actually thinking quite similarly, and in almost all European languages the name for a bat has something to do with a mouse. For example, um, oh, which one was I thinking now? Forgot. But my favorite is French, where the name for a bat literally translates to a bald mouse. A mouse without hair on its head. But every language has some reference to a mouse, which like mouse with wings, mouse with leathery wings, bald mouse, and people get creative from there on. Then there are other bats which have their ears, not positioned at the sides of their face, but the ears actually come ahead, over their eyes and go forward. And not all bats are, dull black and brown, gray in color. There are bats like this, the painted bat, which is bright orange and black in color. Can anybody guess why the painted bat might be so brightly colored? Hmm. To scare predators, that's an interesting answer. One piece of information, this bat actually is very tiny. It's about less than 10 grams in, actually about 5 grams in weight. So it's really tiny. Um, to hide between orange looking fruit, that's a very interesting answer. To stun predators for courtship, to attract prey, that's very fascinating. So all of these answers are really interesting, and but what scientists have found is that when these bats, so the person who was closest to the answer was Rianj. They don't hide in between fruits, but they hide in between dried leaves, particularly banana leaves, which have a tendency to get very orangish and rusty brown in color. And when these bats hide inside shriveled banana leaves, you really can't spot them. And they've also been observed sleeping inside the nests of buyer weavers. Those weaver birds. They've been observed roosting inside the nests of buyer weavers too. So their color is, once the wings fold, it looks like a dried leaf with black veins. So very good for camouflage. Hmm? Yeah. Okay. So next question, where do bats live? So if I tell you, right now at this moment, go and find a bat for me, which is the place where you will point me to? Caves. Okay. First thing that comes to everyone's mind, trees, caves. The big flying foxes, of course, live in trees. Um, Anything other than caves that comes to your mind? Dense trees, yes, like the painted bat looking for dried foliage. Every continent, okay, every country except for Antarctica for sure. Abandoned houses, that's mountains. That's a great answer too. So we've great. We have a very bright audience. All my answers are rather covered. The best place to find bats are obviously caves. Caves are, large, dark places which bats love. At the same time, the temperature inside a cave throughout the seasons is relatively constant. So, so bats can it's like a natural air conditioning permanently on for them to sleep in. So remember that, during the day, bats are sleeping, and that's when you see them inside caves. At night, most of the bats that sleep inside a cave would be out hunting and catching food. So during the daytime, they have stable conditions throughout the year to sleep in. Other places are abandoned places like forts. If any of you are from Hyderabad or Delhi, Delhi has great monuments, archaeological sites, heritage monuments, which are full of bats. Same with Hyderabad. This photo, in fact, is from Golconda Fort in Hyderabad. You should, I mean, for the cultural heritage, you should definitely visit that place. But when you go there, also see this huge bat colony, humongous bat colony. And tree holes. So inside trees, when woodpeckers, make holes in trees, obviously some birds use the hollow portion of the tree for nesting. But when the tree is rather hollow from inside, bats also go in and occupy. And this is a photo from the Andaman Islands where these are bats called lesser false vampires roosting inside a tree hole. And sometimes you don't even need, actually, most often you don't even need to go far from your house. Don't go to a cave anywhere. There are bats 100% living somewhere in your colony at this moment. May not be in your own house, but in your neighbor, anywhere. there are bats 100% living. In fact, I just came back from Nagpur, which is my hometown, and at the moment, on inside in one of our staircases, we have seven of these tiny mouse-like bats living right now. So pipelines, abandoned corners of your house, cracks and crevices, these are all very conducive places for bats to sleep in. And some bats are a little more specialized. For example, the short-nosed fruit bat. This is a very common bat all over the country, particularly in Bangalore. If you wait at anywhere along the roadside at a Singapore cherry tree, you'll see these bats hovering in and feeding on the fruits. So these bats construct something like a tent. So imagine a palm tree, and the male bat bites through the palm leaf and then such that the palm leaf folds and makes a tent. And in that, the male bat prepares a home for multiple females. And but this particular photo is not a palm leaf, but palm fruits of the fish-tailed palm, particularly. And this bat is even more fascinating. It's called the bamboo bat, and you can see why it's called a bamboo bat. It's living inside a bamboo, right? So there are tiny beetles that make holes, just like woodpeckers do on trees. There are tiny beetles that make holes on bamboos, and these bats, which are again, 3 or 4 grams in weight, they go in through that tiny hole. And these bats are also called flat-headed bats because the head is very flat, and that's an adaptation to go into the bamboo. And like lizards, those geckos which cling onto walls, they have suction pads on their feet, and then they go inside the bamboo and stick to the bamboo with the help of these suction pads. Very fascinating creatures, quite common in the northeastern part of the country, which is very rich in bamboos. Okay, next question. What do bats eat? Some of these I've already actually mentioned in passing. Mice? Fruits. Mhm. Fruits and meat. Okay. Now there's an interesting answer here. Suck blood. We'll deal with that in this in a moment. So across these 5 or 10 comments, about 10 comments that have come in, you guys have covered almost the whole range of potential prey out there in nature. And actually, none of you are wrong because we're talking about 1461 species all over the world, right? So obviously, all these species are not going to eat just one thing. They different species specialize on different kind of prey items. A bulk of there are two main groups of bats. A large number, almost 60 to 70% of bats predominantly feed on insects. And then there is a much smaller group of about 200, 300 species that feed on fruits. And these fruit-eating species, some of them are adapted to drink nectar more than fruits. So when I say fruits, I mean nectar leaves during certain seasons when fruits are scarce and they need protein. So it's like eating a salad. So they eat fruits, leaves, and nectar. And then there are species that eat insects. But many of you also commented that they eat meat, and that is correct. The false vampire bats in India, and there are other species in the neotropics, which is Central and South America, and in Southeast Asia, that eat pretty much everything that they can capture. So anything that moves, anything that can fit in their mouth is prey for them, like lizards, mice, fish. There actually are fish-eating bats in Central America, which have large feet, large talons, to catch fish like a Brahmini kite or an osprey. And the last one, which very few people mention, but it's actually correct, that there are bats that drink blood, and they are called vampire bats. The two things to note here are that vampire bats are only found in Central and South America. They're not found in India, so we don't need to worry. Irrespective, they do not drink human blood. There are cases of humans being bitten in defense or accidentally, and which can actually cause rabies. But those instances are very few, and predominantly these vampire bats are looking for prey of or for blood of horses, pigs, deer, birds, sleeping birds, etc. So humans don't have much to worry from vampire bats. Okay, now last question for this section. How do bats catch their prey? Okay, two answers saying echolocation, which is a very large word I don't understand the meaning of. Can somebody briefly try and explain echolocation to me? And you can unmute and speak up.
If you want to speak, you can raise your hand using the Zoom raise hand feature and you can unmute you.
We have Arvalan raising her hand.
Echolocation is sound that an animal makes and bounces off in anything that it touches and comes back to the animal.
Great answer. Excellent answer. And just one short clarification. Is this any kind of sound or does the sound need to be of a particular kind?
Um,
So
uh,
can I
a
can
few
I echolocate, or to ask that question differently,
if
can
you
I
have
echolocate with?
if you have practice,
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I did not understand that. Can you repeat that, Arvilan?
if you have practice,
No, they're asking, can the sound be of any type, or does it have to be of any particular type? Probably like frequency or something. I didn't.
Right.
I
So
don't know.
can I
two
echolocate with?
frequencies,
Mhm.
please.
Okay, okay. So we are getting closer to the answer. Thank you so much, Arvind. That was a great answer and well explained in a very few words. And we have Dhruv and Thiran also commenting high frequency sound. So let's try and unpack this, big fancy word echolocation and understand it clearly. And actually, you don't need to go beyond Arvalan's explanation. But since I have it on my slide and I've been called the Batman, I think I'm obliged to tell you the answer here. So bats produce really high frequency sound, which is called ultrasound. It's a sound that is beyond our hearing range. This sound travels, it hits objects. Imagine you are in a mountain or in an empty room, you produce sound, you hear the echo, that's what's happening here. Bats are producing high frequency sound, it's hitting objects, it's getting reflected from objects and coming back to the bat. Now, it sounds simple, but where the beauty of this lies in how fast a bat is doing it. If you've seen a bat hunting at a street light, they keep circling around it, catching insects. Now, and while they are circling around, at every second, they are letting sound out in different directions. And once this sound, all of this sound then hits different objects. If there is, say, if I'm standing in front of a bat, or if there's a wall in front of a bat, the sound will hit the wall, it will get bounced, it will bounce off and immediately come back to the bat. But if I'm standing in front of the bat, a lot of the sound will hit my skin, some of it will get absorbed, and the rest will go to the bat. So there is a difference in, how much sound has gone back and how much time the sound has taken to get bounced back to the bat, right? So within milliseconds, not even seconds, within milliseconds, bats make these complex calculations in their mind and figure out whether there is an object in front of them, whether there's prey in front of them, whether there's predator in front of them. And of course, this takes a lot of time to learn, but they're doing all of this through sound. And that is that is the beauty of being a bat. And now the natural question is, how did people even get thinking about, bats navigating through sound? So this The people have been wondering this for a very long time because you see a tiny animal flying in the night sky with small eyes, minuscule eyes that you can't even see. And the first person who made a breakthrough was this Italian priest called Lazzaro Spallanzani. And Spallanzani, priests during that time, during those days, were heavily invested in science. And so Spallanzani brought in a few bats from wherever he lived. He put them inside a dark room and created a maze with threads and made the bats fly. None of the bats crashed into any of the threads. He blindfolded the bats, repeated the experiment. Again, same result. None of the bats crashed. Now, with a tiny animal where you can't see anything, Spallanzani did something cruel. He slightly notched the ears of the bat and then repeated the experiment. And this time, the bats did not know where they were going. They were crashing into everything left, right, and center. So at that moment, we're talking about 1798. At that moment, Spallanzani determined positively that bats were using sound to navigate, but what exactly they were doing remained a mystery for the next 150 years, when eventually in the 1950s, Professor Donald Griffin in the US actually recorded bat calls. He actually made a very bulky setup and gave firm evidence that bats were producing calls that we can't hear, and that's what's helping them navigate. And very interesting fact, blind people, blind human beings, visually impaired human beings can also be taught to echolocate by producing, clicks from their tongues. And that's the word coined by Donald Griffin. The term became that we know today is called echolocation, using echoes to locate your position in a particular space. Okay, so if there are any clarifications, I can take them now before we go to the next section.
If you have any questions related to things that we have covered until now, you can unmute yourself and ask the questions, or you can also type it in the chat.
Okay, if there is nothing, I'll keep moving, but don't worry. I mean, even if you haven't figured out your question by now, you have plenty of time. I'll aim to finish in the next 20 minutes, so we have plenty of time for questions. And now that I'm well and truly woken up, I can do a little more talking than you, uh, and let you figure out your questions for the end. So now we're going to look at some common bats that you will come across in either your day-to-day life, or if you're a little more adventurous and visit a forest or visit a cave, these are some bats that you will see in and around your cities. The most common, the most familiar bat in the country is the Indian flying fox. Now, this is a large bat, fruit-eating bat. Interesting or important point to note, most fruit-eating bats in India do not produce ultrasound. They do not echolocate. The reason is simple. They're looking for fruit, which is smelly, which is colorful, so they don't really need to produce sound to locate fruit, right? So the Indian flying fox is one of the largest bats in the whole world, and we are very privileged to have this bat living in our cities. If any of you, the best time to watch them, actually, a project that you can do right, sitting in your, standing in your terraces, is look at the directions in which the flying foxes are going in all throughout the year, and you might notice that they're changing the direction in certain seasons. The reason is that they're going after fruit that comes up in different parts of the city at different times, right? Like mango will only come up during the summers, it will not come up during winters, right? So like that, different fruits are fruiting at different point, and depending on that, flying foxes keep flying in different directions, especially early in the evening. Another great time to watch flying foxes is on a hot summer evening. Uh, Stand next to a lake and you'll see flying foxes coming down to drink water. And they drink water in a very interesting way as well. They don't sip water directly while they're flying. What they do is they come down and they dip their belly just a little bit. They make a splash and then they go and sit on a tree and lick, the water from their fur. I can see Navya has raised her hand. Do we take this question now, Amrita?
Yeah, if you
Mm-hmm.
want, we
Okay.
can unmute.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to say that I see them a lot over here
Okay.
in the evenings. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Great.
and they always make very weird noises.
Yeah, they can
I,
be quite
yeah,
noisy.
yeah.
But great, thanks for sharing that, Navya. Because and I'm glad that you're paying attention not just to what you're seeing, but you're also using your ears, which is how wildlife should be watched. You use all your senses to watch wildlife. So thanks for sharing that. Now, coming to the next fruit-eating bat that you're very likely to see in cities is the short-nosed fruit bat. People in Bangalore have a solid chance of seeing this bat every day, but in most other places as well, you see this bat very commonly. This is less than half the size of a flying fox, so it's about this big, about 15-20 centimeters from head to toe. And like I said, the males make a tent in palm leaves or in palm fruits, and there's a big fat male which makes this tent, and all the females come and choose that male, like probably how they would choose Salman Khan, which is a very bad choice though, but that's how it works, seems to work in the animal world. The other fruit-eating bat that is commonly encountered in cities is the fulvous fruit bat. It's a little rarer in cities, but if you are privileged enough to live in a city like Delhi or Hyderabad, which has abandoned forts and temples, these bats are, they love living in such places and they form very large colonies. Again, like Navya said, for the flying fox, these bats are also very noisy. They keep screeching all throughout the day when they should ideally be sleeping, but somehow they don't seem to be very sleep deprived. They keep fighting and squabbling inside the cave throughout the day. And un, and the short-nosed fruit bat, which forms smaller groups. Unlike that, the fulvous fruit bat always likes to live in large colonies of, 500,000, 10,000 individuals. The other bat, not the most common in cities, but at the edge of cities and closer to forests, is the false vampire bat. And this is the only carnivorous bat that we have in India. And if you look at this, this is the bat that I said has these large bunny-like ears. Now, most things in nature, they're like when you see something odd, you automatically start thinking, why is it that odd? And sometimes it has a reason. In this particular case, this bat it produces ultrasound, but it does not use ultrasound as much as it relies on its own listening. So it flies close to the ground, and when, say for example, it's flying close to the ground and a mouse is eating something. So it's obviously making some sound by, scratching fruits or it's through its movements. This bat is smart enough to listen for the prey's movement, and then once it's found where the prey is moving, it pounces on the prey. And one of its most important prey items are katydids. These are, cricket-like animals with very large feet, where and they constantly produce sound at night. So these bats are listening for the sound. They're also listening for how the females are moving to the males that are making the sound, and then they catch those insects. Very, very fascinating bat. Now, another species, especially if you are in a drier part of the country, for example, in Nagpur High Court actually has some of these bats called tomb bats. So they like living in abandoned houses or in caves where they actually form much larger colonies. Um, and the reason why they're called tomb bats is, because in drier areas where there were a lot of tombs constructed during the Mughal era, these all the way from the Middle East to India. These bats ended up living inside tombs and abandoned monuments, and they're tiny mouse-like bats. Make actually not quite tiny, slightly bigger, about about 10 to 12, 10 to 15 centimeters from head to toe, and they make mouse-like calls as well. Um, and another interesting thing to note is this tail that they have. A slightly naked mouse-like tail, but not a very long tail. Interestingly, this tail has tiny and sharp hairs on top of the tail. Now, these hair are just like a cat uses its whiskers to sense, to sense its surroundings. These bats use these hair on their tail to 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 sort of look backwards because they don't have a rear view mirror, and they're hanging on these cliffs. They use their tail to sense whether they can, if a predator approaches them, can they walk backwards and hide inside a crevice or not. So just the same thing as a cat's whiskers, but put on a tail. Similar to the tomb bat are mouse-tail bats. These ones have a much longer tail, a much longer whip-like tail. Again, people from Delhi, great chance of seeing this bat in places like Firoz Shah Kotla and Khirki Masjid, which is now closed to tourists. But these are places where you have tons and tons of mouse-tail bats. Now, this is an interesting bat. It's called a horseshoe bat. The reason is that this whole thing is the nose of the bat, and this particular part looks like a horseshoe. So, the shoe that is put under a horse and it creates tuck, tuck, tuck sound. This part of the nose looks like a horseshoe. And again, this is, there's a reason behind this. This bat produces ultrasound, but not through its mouth, but through its nose, through the nostrils, which are somewhere over here. So essentially, this bat is speaking out of a loudspeaker. So, the sound gets amplified, it gets directed at particular directions. So, it's not spreading all over, it's very focused sound. And naturally, when a bat is producing such a nasal sound, it has to sound very, very odd. And I have a recording for you. It's not exactly, we will never know what the bat exactly sounds like because it is way above our hearing range. But I have a recording, and if you bring the frequency down to our hearing range, this is what the bat will sound like. Listen to it. So it's a very robotic, very alien-like sound. I'll play that again. Yeah. Mm-mm. It is playing, right, Amrita?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So now going to the next family, these are leaf-nosed bats. Actually, Bangalore is a great place to see leaf-nosed bats. IISc campus in Bangalore has one stretch where leaf-nosed bats are quite active. They like slightly forested areas or open areas with bushes. And there are different species that are found all over India, even in near Bangalore. There are some species that are small, there are some species that are slightly bigger in size. And like the horseshoe bats, these bats are also producing sound through the nostrils, but they sound completely different. And you'll hear what and I'll tell you what it sounds like. So, it sounds like somebody's trying to kickstart a scooter, but is failing repeatedly. Or if you want to be even more nasty, it actually sounds like a fart to me. And I will actually play that again. So that's the call of a leaf-nosed bat. That sounds like a fart. Horseshoe and leaf-nosed bats often like to live together. For example, in this photo, which is from the Andaman Island, there's a mixed colony of horseshoe and leaf-nosed bats inside a cave. The most common bat that you will see in your cities are called pipistrelles. There are different species of pipistrelles. These are small mouse-like bats. The moment it gets dark, sometimes even like just as soon as the sun sets, you start seeing these small bats that keep flying around hunting for insects. 9 out of 10 times they would be pipistrelles, and pipistrelles have a very different call, slightly higher pitched, like a bird whistle. So it's a very thin whistle-like call, and and towards the end you heard a call. That was a call that the bat was using for communicating with others. So in between their echolocation calls, they produce slightly lower frequency calls, which allow them to communicate. Oops. Okay, now the third part of this presentation, and we have about 5 or 10 slides, about somewhere between 5 to 10 slides to cover. This part of the presentation is about, what have we been hearing about bats, and are these things correct or not? So these are certain myths that you would have heard very commonly about bats, and so have I, that bats drink our blood, they fly into our hair, they snatch our eyes, and generally, animals that bring bad luck. All of these, I mean, well, bringing bad luck or not is very subjective, so I'm going to leave that to your judgment. But the fact that an animal can bring good or bad luck itself doesn't make sense scientifically. It's a value that you are assigning to the animal. But all of these things, that bats drink human blood, they fly into our hair. When somebody tells these stories, I mean, when my grandmother told me these, of course, I had no option but to listen. But now, if somebody tells me this, my only response is, they really have better things to do. They have to feed themselves, they have to feed their pups, and getting into your hair is not going to give them anything. Um, and all over the world, there are this is not something that is restricted to India. These are myths that are spread all over the world. And the biggest problem that bats face in the world today is just their bad reputation. And for this, again, globally, we have many different organizations that are trying to conserve bats. So I've put some of these out here, and of course, I've put Nature Conservation Foundation, which through my project we are also doing some bat conservation projects in the country. But there are other international organizations, UK-based organizations, another Bangalore-based organization, which are working tirelessly to save bats uh, from all of these threats, from all of these, educating people against these myths, but also trying to protect bats from larger issues like hunting, habitat loss, deforestation, etc. And another documentary that I really recommend, because this is right from the country, and it was produced by Al Jazeera, uh, an international media outlet. I will drop the link in the chat for you just after I finish the talk. But this is about the conservation of the koala leaf-nosed bat, which is a species found only in one single cave in a village called Kolar, which is in between Bangalore and Chennai. And this bat, there are around 200 individuals. So there are 1,400 tigers in India. Compared to that, there are just 200 individuals of this particular bat living in one cave, and nobody knows about them, right? And there are people who are working to conserve these bats, and this documentary is about that. Incidentally, it also features me. Um, And why are people, caring about bats? Why? I mean, it's just an animal, if there's a myth surrounding it, we can let people kill it, right? But there are people working towards bats, and there's a reason behind that. The main reasons are that fruit bats are very important pollinators. They pollinate flowers like wild bananas, certain species of mangroves, and if any of you have heard of the tree called mahua, which is very common in forests in central India and South India, a lot of indigenous tribes depend on that tree. Bats are some of the important pollinators of these trees, and those large fruit-eating bats, flying foxes, they eat the fruits, and they disperse the seeds very far off from the tree. And so, in a sense, fruit bats are like the natural gardeners of the forest, or even of trees within the city. On the other hand, insect-eating bats are consuming a lot of insects. For example, a small 5-gram bat can eat up to 30% of its body weight in a single night, right? So that accounts to something like 3,000 to 5,000 insects in a single night. And these include insects like mosquitoes, and insects that damage crops like rice, corn, even chocolate. So all your lives, all your entertainment is in some way dependent to bats eating insects or fruits around you. So, like I said, if you live in a place like Mumbai or Chennai, you're protected by mangroves, and bats are in a way contributing to spreading these mangroves and creating this natural barrier to protect you from cyclones. And they're also protecting you from mosquitoes, which give you malaria. So, if you were to contribute to bat conservation, what can you do? Like I said, the biggest problem that bats face is their bad reputation. So, most importantly, learn more about bats. That is what you're doing today, hopefully, uh, and spread this information, to others. So, be aware, learn more about your surroundings. Think of starting a bat club either in your school, or put it in the nature club in your school. And try to educate others. Start with your family, start with your friends, and let the message flow. Reduce the use of pesticides, especially if you have a garden, which is also the next point. Try to let your garden run a bit wild. Don't keep it pedicured, manicured. Let it run a bit wild. That attracts insects, then that attracts bats. If you reduce the use of pesticide, then insects flourish, and so do bats. So, these are simple ways in which you can make the city more habitable for bats. And in the end, I'll just leave you with this particular example, which is from Cambodia. This is a beautiful example, one of my favorites, one of my favorite examples of bats and of the relationship between bats and humans. So this is from a village in Cambodia, sent to me by a friend. Um, all these haystacks that you see are actually put together to attract bats. Now, because of these haystacks and the moisture, bats like living inside them, and they're dark from inside. So a lot of bats go there and they sleep inside. Now, at night, these bats fly out. The farmers have their rice fields around. So the bats go, they fly around, they eat all the insects that damage the rice crops, then they come back to sleep. While sleeping, bats keep pooping a lot. So all the poop from there drops on these mats that they've spread underneath the roost. Um, Bat poop is very rich in nitrogen and ammonia, so it makes for excellent fertilizer. So just by providing free shelter to bats, what these farmers are doing is they're getting free pest control, they're getting free fertilizer. So it's a win-win situation for both bats and humans, and this is the kind of relationship with bats that we need to cultivate in the society, as opposed to people being scared of bats frantically. And when I was your age, I read this message somewhere, it stayed with me, and I want to put it out to you again. If Don't think about, what you are doing is a very, is a very tiny contribution. Ultimately, the ocean is made by tiny drops. If a lot of us do a little, a lot automatically gets done. And if you spread this information to one more person, and that person spreads this information to another, automatically, it will in in a few months, it will lead to 100 or 1,000 people getting educated about bats. So this is the message that I want to leave you with. And great talking to all of you. I look forward to your questions now.
Thank you so much, Rohit, for taking us through the world of bats. And we do have some questions in the chat. While I pull them out from the chat, we can, yeah, you can, guys can raise hand. You can drop your questions in the chat as well. Vishwa, yes, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Do bats pollinate cactus?
Cactus, I'm not very sure about, but they do pollinate another very important desert plant called agave. And agave is it's a plant from Central and South America, and bats are very important pollinators of agave. And when you grow older, Vishwa, or if or you can tell your parents this, that the agave plant leads to is the plant that is used to produce an alcohol called tequila. So that's a very a much loved alcoholic drink. And if your parents enjoy drinking tequila, or if any of your friends or family enjoy drinking tequila, do tell them that they're getting the tequila because of the bats.
अच्छा
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there's one question in the chat which says, what are the predators of bats?
Great question. When bats are sleeping inside caves or abandoned houses or wherever, and particularly when they are sleeping in large numbers, um, they are very vulnerable to getting eaten by other animals. And imagine you are in a forest, there is a cave, and there are a million bats inside that cave. As a predator, that's like a party for you. So you'll keep visiting that cave again and again because there's reliable source of food there. So in many places, so inside the cave, snakes congregate to eat bats. There are small mammals like mongooses, civets, which are mongooses, of course, are very familiar to you. Civets are cat-like mammals, small in size, larger than your cat. They eat bats too. And a lot of birds wait outside the cave, or wait outside places from where they've seen bats come out during dusk. They wait for the bats, and then once the bats are coming out, they go and hunt them. For example, in my house in Nagpur, we have a shikra that does this very commonly. There's a female shikra that always hangs around our house. She knows where the bats are coming out of, and then she tries to hunt them.
We have another person raising their hand. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Philippines eagles hunt bats.
Sorry, I missed a few words.
Philippines eagles hunt bats.
Eagles? Was that did
He says Philippine eagles.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's yeah.
There's
Sorry,
a question
I
about predators in the chat. He's just
right.
6.5. He's not like really comfortable typing yet, so I'm just
No,
shadowing him.
that's absolutely fine. And I apologize, I
Same.
have a hearing problem, so sometimes I miss a few words,
I understand.
but
Sorry. Yeah.
that's a great example. Philippine eagles do hunt bats.
So there's another question from YouTube which says, how do you catch bats to study them?
Okay, that's a yeah, it's a fun process. We put out nets, which if you imagine them to be badminton nets that are in a badminton court. So, but these are very thin nets, and we put them out like a badminton net in the forest or in places where we expect bats to fly. For example, over thin streams or stagnant water where bats would come down to drink water or to eat insects. In such places, we put out this net, and then when the bat gets caught, we untangle the bat and take measurements, take photos. So all the photos that you see from the in this presentation was most of them come from bats that I've caught and handled in the wild. Yeah, and then once we are done, examining the bat, we let it go.
Rivu, you can unmute yourself and ask.
Speaks.
How do bats stay safe from predators?
How do I missed the
How
words?
do bats stay safe from predators? Is what
Oh,
he's
stay safe from predators. Okay. Different. Yeah, so when they are sleeping inside a cave or wherever in the house or wherever, that time it's a bit hard for them to escape because they're not completely in their senses. When they are actually flying out, they do not have a lot of predators because there are not too many animals that are active in the night. Well, there are owls and there are certain predators, but very few owls are actually fast enough to catch bats. Some species like hawk owls can glide and catch bats, but most others are not very fast enough to catch bats. But some species of bats, like the painted bat that you saw in the presentation, they figured a way out to to make their sleeping time more peaceful. They have camouflage. They'll resemble dried leaves, and they sleep in dried leaves so that they can camouflage and a predator will not see them.
Navya, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah. So I like paleontology quite a lot. And would you have any examples of prehistoric bats?
Okay. Let me pull this link out 1 second. So there are. Oops, sorry. I had to stop sharing. How do I go back? Uh, or just give me a moment, Navya. I will put it in the chat. It's a lovely video that you all should watch. Oh, actually, this is another video that I wanted to put in the chat for you guys. Um, this is the documentary that I was talking about, and PBS Eons Bats. Yeah. So this video will tell you all about bat fossils that you need to know.
A bat fluttered through the sky above what's now Wyoming.
No, stop. Yeah. So there are a couple of bat fossils that are known to science, and something called Icaronecteris. But for all the details, just look at this video. Actually, all of you should, whether you're interested in paleontology, archaeology, or not, you should definitely look at this video, and it's a great way to understand bat evolution.
Lovely. What we'll do is we'll also put these links in the YouTube description so that whenever you want, you can go there and check them out there as well. So
Perfect.
up to the next question. Kiran, you can unmute yourself and ask.
House, I have seen a type of bat. I don't know what it was. It was around 10 centimeter in height. It had a pink face and it was sleeping under my chair. And then we pushed it away.
Okay. Was this in your, sorry,
Can you tell me what type of bat that was?
was that in your city? Where do you live?
I live in Pondicherry.
In Pondicherry. It may have been one of the pipistrelles, because those are the most common bats that you see in cities. But honestly, to identify the exact species, it's a long and tedious process. Sometimes you have to record their calls. Sometimes you have to take photos from certain angles, and then a scientist like me can tell more about the correct identification.
Since Kiran mentioned about a bat that he saw in his house. There was a question in the chat which says, "What do you do if a bat comes into your house?"
I see. Okay. If a bat comes into your house, my advice would be to first and foremost switch the fans off, because otherwise they'll crash into the fans and die. Switch the fans off, open all the doors and windows, and then try to guide the bat towards the exit. Don't try to hold the bat, don't try to handle it. If you are absolutely compelled to hold the bat, I would suggest using gloves, or covering your hand with something. And but most of the times, if the bat is flying, just get two or three people together and just try to distract it towards the exit.
So, is there a particular reason why do you say not to handle them directly? Because there was someone who said in the chat as well that
Yeah.
their mother thinks that they are poisonous. Are there any
Right.
bats like that?
So the general, this is not just an advice for a bat, but for every animal that I would give you, because all these animals are wild. We don't know what kind of viruses they might be carrying. It's always good practice to handle bats, particularly mammals. Birds sometimes, because they're a little less related to us. We are mammals, and all other mammals can give us diseases very easily. So it's always good to hold any animal with some kind of protection on your hand. Other than that, you should also, I mean, because these are mammals, they can bite in self-defense. You don't want to be unnecessarily bitten. And the chance of getting rabies from a bat is 1 in 1,000. It's minuscule, but if you have the chance, if you have the option of using protection, why take the chance? Yep. You're muted, Amrita.
Yeah, sorry. So I was just saying there are a lot of questions around bats and the diseases they carry, but we can probably take them later.
Yeah.
There are some other interesting questions in the chat. There is someone who asking, do bats fight with each other?
Okay. And we also have Sukh and Nidarshana has also raised their
Yes.
hand now. But anyway, I'll answer that one first. So do bats fight? They fight a lot. They fight inside like pulvous fruit bats, those fruit-eating bats that live in large colonies inside caves. They keep squabbling all the time. Flying foxes, which you see sleeping on trees, they also keep squabbling all the time. And I have a feeling that these fights get even more intense during the breeding season, because then the males are trying to fight it out to attract females.
So you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Cannot hear you here yet
Yeah,
on
just
you.
unmute.
Are you not
You
able
want
to
to type?
unmute yourself? Uh, maybe you can figure out this technical glitch that you're having and you're not able to unmute yourself. We'll meanwhile move to the next person to ask their question. Nidarshana, you can ask your question.
Why do cats sing upside down?
Great question. And this is a question that I get every time, and I don't include it in my presentation so that somebody will ask me. Bats are the main reason why bats hang upside down. um, strange answer is actually so that they can take off better. So they are slightly heavier animals. So if you know birds, their bones are a bit hollow. They are prepared, that they are by evolution they are made to be very lightweight and very aerodynamic. bats are not built like that. So bats are slightly heavier animals. And when a bat is hanging like this, upside down, and it wants to take off, all that it needs to do is drop, open its wings like a parachute, and then it can fly. So when you have a bat on the ground, you will notice that they actually struggle to take off. You have to often, uh, you often have to push them or put them on a height so that they can fly off. So great question. Bats hang upside down so that they have an easy takeoff.
Navya, do you want to ask your question now?
So I have one bat-related experience to share. So I was visiting my grandmother in Bihar, and one day while I was in the bedroom, there was a bat underneath the bed. I don't know what it was, the type of bat it was, but it had rabbit-like ears.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
and I told Mama to off the fan,
Mm-hmm.
and then it just came out from the other side and flew
Wow.
out, and yeah.
Wow. I wish I could have that experience too. It sounds like so rabbit-like ears, of course, quite, I mean, very likely to be a false vampire bat, but then they're not the most common in cities or in villages. Well, in villages they might exist. So it's possible that, the bat was hunting in a nearby area and then it accidentally flew in and just by accident found that the bed is the only piece of cover that it can find to stay hidden. But that's a very good experience. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes. So do you want to try unmuting yourself again? We are requesting you to unmute, so you'll see a pop-up. If you're not able to, you can type your question in the chat box. Seems like you're not being able to unmute yourself, so we request you to type your question in the chat. We'll take the question from SK.
Ask. Ask.
We cannot hear you.
Bolo.
So I don't know what is the difference between the bat and the flying wolf.
Flying fox.
Flying fox, ox. I think the flying fox is a brown out and the bat is black.
And black. That's
Mhm.
right.
Okay. So all flying foxes are bats. Bat, when I say the word bat, it covers everything from a tiny bat that fits on my palm to the flying fox. So the flying fox is also a kind of bat, but but when I say flying fox, it indicates that I'm talking about the larger bats, the bats that are really large, live on trees, have large wingspans of about 5-6 feet. And they're fruit eating. So those are the bats that I say when I imply when I say flying fox.
But both are in the dark.
That's a very interesting question. So they are all bats are active during the night. So they're all active during when it is dark. But the flying fox, because it's such a large animal, it doesn't always sleep inside dark areas. It also it's you see it. In fact, if you've seen flying foxes in your city, they hang on trees out in the open, right? And a lot of scientists believe that because they don't have predators, they're so large they can fight off predators. That is the reason why they choose such brightly lit areas as opposed to living in caves.
So, since you mentioned about some bats not being in caves and stuff, there's a question on YouTube that asks, what do bats do during, or where do they live during the morning hours?
Right. So during the daytime, bats live in dark places typically, apart from the flying foxes which live on caves, which live on trees. All other bats live in caves, in houses, abandoned monuments, and that is the time when they sleep, and they also spend a lot of time in their social interactions. Because the night time is a busy time for them. They have to go out, hunt, etc. But once they are all inside the bat cave, they spend time grooming each other, making friends, making family, and investing their time in building social relations. Sorry.
Yes. And there's one question from Riyansh in the chat. He asked that he'd seen a video, and in that a person was recording a bat, and when it used echolocation, the camera started shaking. Do you have any
Ah.
idea why this might happen?
That's human imagination gone completely wild. And a lot of people shared that video with me. Trust me, it should have required a very high-speed camera in order to film that and make sense of it. Secondly, that's really not how echolocation works. Otherwise, if you put it's not like a bat is an opera singer. The bats um it's it's I don't have a thorough scientific explanation, but from whatever I have experienced, whatever other bat researchers have experienced, it's not that you put a bat inside a room and it'll shatter all your glasses. So it's completely, it might have happened. We don't know what the circumstances were in which that video was taken, but it was totally imaginary. It doesn't it I have from whatever I've seen, I have very little reason to believe it was echolocation causing, the movement of the camera.
Okay. Riyansh, I hope that answers your question. There's an interesting question from Suk in the chat. Says, how do bats eat, drink, use bathroom, and do all the things that they do upside down? And wouldn't their pee and poo go on them when they are upside down?
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking that question, Suk. Yeah, I really wish I could have, actually heard you asking that question. Uh, it would have made it more interesting. So bats do have to correct their position whenever they are peeing and pooing. And in fact, you would find a lot of videos on YouTube showing how bats pee. So flying foxes, and most of these videos come from flying foxes. So they have to, their thumbs are quite large and they have massive claws. So they correct their position, they hang on their thumbs, and let everything out, whether it's pee or poo. Not just pee and poop, also human, also their babies. They don't deliver babies while hanging upside down. They have to correct their positions. And that brings me to another interesting story. In a zoo, a person once observed that a species of flying fox, which is found in Mauritius, a female was going to deliver a baby. So she corrected her position, and automatically all the other females, the aunts and the sisters of the mother, all of them huddled together to try and catch the baby. So that was so they, in a sense, they started acting like midwives, trying to protect the baby and trying to take it to the right position onto its mother's chest and not allowing it to drop to the ground.
Lovely. So, yes, SK, please unmute yourself and ask your question. SK, are you able to unmute yourself? Yeah, go ahead.
A bat has a sharp thing nearby her wings. Is it for fighting two enemies?
So if I understood that question, the wing, is it used for fighting? Is that
The sharp thing nearby the wing. Is it like one claw, one thing?
Um, okay, the claw on the wings. Well, it could be used for fighting, although I don't know if people have actually observed, claws being used for fighting. But the but apart from that, the most important use is, to hang in the right position, downside up rather than upside down. So those thumbs, the thumb claws allow them to correct their position. But they could be used for fighting as well, or to play, thumb fights.
Yeah. It will be interesting to see bats actually playing thumb fights. Yeah. So just since we've hit the 12 o'clock mark, uh, just one thing that in case you are, since it's 12 and anyone is leaving the Zoom chat, you can, I've shared a feedback form. Please take a minute and fill that out so that it helps us to improve these sessions and get do better next time. And we do have some more questions from YouTube, which I'll go ahead and ask because I don't see
Okay.
any questions here. But yes, there Sukh has sent one question, and it reminds me that there was another question
Yeah.
earlier in the chat which said, have you ever heard or seen anyone having a pet, or like bat as a pet, and is it legal or not? And there was some other question which also was relating to this, like what are the laws related to bats as
Yeah.
pets? So
So, I've never, at least not in India. I mean, there are a lot of people who rescue bats and then so they're not really pets, but they're rescuing the bats and then they're releasing them once they're fine. I haven't heard of people actually keeping bats as pets. Flying foxes, maybe in certain parts of the world, have been kept as pets. In India, it is not, it is prohibited by law. The smaller bats, technically by law, you could keep them as pets, but obviously I would not recommend that. And to be honest, you don't really need to have them as pets. Well, you don't really need to confine them. Somewhere in your house, you do have those small bats, just find them, keep observing them. Whether it's legal or not, it's just something that's not recommended to unnecessarily confine a wild animal. I can be here for another 5 minutes, and then
yes.
have to leave.
Yeah, okay. So we'll just quickly take a few questions from
Mhm.
YouTube as well. There was one, there were multiple questions around diseases that bats
Mm.
hold, as they are usually referred to as reservoirs of a lot of viruses. So that was one question, like what are the different, is that really true if they are actually reservoirs
Yeah.
of viruses? And are there any types of illnesses that bats undergo?
Yeah.
And do all bats transmit freely?
Right. So that's going to be a slightly longish answer. It requires a bit of nuance. Well, it is true that bats are reservoirs for a lot of viruses that can kill us. The chances of a bat actually being infected with that virus and the chance that it will, transmit that virus to us is where what we need to focus on, and that is very low. That probability of transmission can increase, especially when we try to confine a bat, when we try to, or there is a lot of habitat destruction which causes stress to the bat. And naturally, you would have noticed this as well. When you're stressed, you are more likely to get fever, right? And that's what happens to bats. If they're stressed, seeing a lot of destruction of the habitat around them, the chance of that virus jumping from them to other animals increases. But the point that I said, that bats do have a lot of viruses, while that is true, we should also remember that people haven't put in as much effort into sampling other species of mammals, as much as they have, screened viruses in bats. And the reason why they keep screening bats to this extent is A, of course, because there is a higher probability of finding viruses, but at the same time, bats are relatively easier to catch, relatively easier to study. But if you were to study the viruses of a tiger, you would have to first immobilize it and then do something, right? So bats are easier to work with, which also sometimes increases the probability of scientists actually finding newer viruses in them. Um, and the second part of the question, do bats get any illness from us? That's a very important question. And if you read about white nose syndrome, I leave it in the chat because it's a very important conservation issue. But white nose syndrome is a disease, is a fungal disease that affects hibernating bats, that is currently affecting hibernating bats in North America. And it was introduced by humans from, maybe people who visit caves often, from Europe to North America. And every time, and a lot of times when bats go into hibernation, this fungus, gets on them and starts depleting their fat reserves, and then bats die. So it's been causing deaths of millions and millions of bats for the last decade in North America. And it's a huge conservation issue. So there are more. So to put these things into perspective, there's a stronger example of bats dying because of humans than humans dying because of bats.
I hope that answers a lot of questions that were there on YouTube, and so yeah. If you have another minute, there's one
I can
question.
take one question.
Yeah. So basically, these are two questions from two people, but
Mhm.
again, kind of related. One is, how do you differentiate the genders, and if there is any difference in the fecal matter of male and female flying foxes, and if there is, then how do you differentiate?
Right. So fecal matter is very hard to differentiate. It's to assign gender from fecal matter is very hard, but to actually determine the gender of the bat, the sex of the bat, very easy. You just need to look at the genitals, just like you would do for a human baby or human in general. And in smaller species, of course, it's very hard to observe that. You need to catch them and then see it. But flying foxes, if you get a good look, you can easily tell which one is a male and which one is a female. And oftentimes, in some of the smaller bats, it becomes easy to tell males and females during the breeding season because the females carry the pups on them. The males in most species of bats, there is the males hardly contribute to raising the young one. Very patriarchal society in most cases, but there are exceptions.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
there are a few questions on if there are any identification keys and how to identify bats. So
Mhm.
maybe you can share these
Yeah.
results or links with us, and we
Mhm.
can share them through an email with everyone who is registered.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can share it with me, and we can share it send it forward to everyone.
Perfect.
So
I can do
I
that.
think that covers a lot of questions. And since we are short on time now, if you have any more questions, you can write to us, or you can directly write to Rohit. If you Rohit, you're comfortable, you can share your
Yeah.
email ID in the chat, and we can share. They can write to you with questions, or if they write to us with questions, we can forward it to him, and we can get answers to your questions after the session as well. I hope every one of you enjoyed and learned a lot about bats, and now I'm not now the mystery of bats have kind of resolved for you, and now you can make a better choice on whether you want to like bats or not. I've again shared the feedback form in the chat, so if you can take a minute, if you have yet not filled the form, please do fill it. And Thank you, Rohit, for such a wonderful session and taking us
My pleasure.
into the bat cave and through. And the most interesting part for me was to hear the calls and how different the calls and to a certain extent weird they were. And
Thank you.
but yeah,
My
overall,
pleasure.
just knowing more about bats was interesting. Thank you so
Mhm.
much, and
Glad that
I
it was
hope
useful.
everyone else also feels. I'm very sure everyone else feels the same thing. And we'll be again having a session about some other things in nature in the coming months as well. So do follow us and do keep in touch so that you can join us for the next sessions as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you again, Rohit.
Bye-bye.
Bye.